Hi, yeah, is everyone seeing the presentation? Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, okay. So thank you once again. Thank you, Marwa. Yeah. So I do anticipate stepping on some of the other panelists' points, but I just do want to emphasize a slightly more, holistic overview of what's happening in Sudan and not just propaganda, misinformation, but other intersections as well as the information blackout. And I think these are all, of course, crucial to understanding the siege that journalism in Sudan is under. Okay, so it's the first slide. So when the war erupted in April 2023, between the Sudanese Armed Forces, the SAF, and the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, professional media in Sudan collapsed almost overnight. Thousands of journalists were displaced, newsrooms were shut down, and equipment was destroyed. And those who remained were often reporting under extreme risk. So what happened is that a dangerous information vacuum emerged. Information shifted almost entirely to Facebook, WhatsApp, TikTok, and X. And this is critical. Why? Because digital platforms are no longer just mirrors of conflict. They have a role in actively shaping it. And the same mechanisms that amplify hate speech also amplify misinformation. And as journalists, we are battling both simultaneously, and they are often two sides of the same coin. And I think what I really want people to understand is that this isn't simply just, a war of arms. Of course, it's a war over narrative, legitimacy, and truth. So yeah, the internet shutdowns and telecom disruptions have severely restricted reporting. And of course, we've seen disruptions to the telecommunication networks, like Marvelous mentioned. Of course, to the main three, Zain, Sudani, and MTN. What's important to also add is the use of Starlink devices. I think that was mentioned, but of course, Starlink devices have been, smuggled in to Sudan, and in some cases, we've seen the RSF renting out use of Wi-Fi from Starlink devices and doing it at ridiculous amounts. But I mean, since then, I do believe that the Starlink services have been rolled back. But yeah, so in many areas, journalists cannot physically reach the conflict zones they're reporting on, and reporting often depends on unstable calls, fragmented witness accounts, satellite imagery, and piecing together fragments of truth from exile. So this is one of the few wars where journalists are often verifying events they cannot physically access. And at the same time, Sudan has been shrouded in international media silence. And of course, this isn't because nothing is happening, it's because these stories literally can't get out. So when connectivity is cut, it doesn't just silence journalists, it also cuts off life-saving information for civilians. So, in the absence of independent journalism, other actors have filled the vacuum. So, we've seen propaganda hubs, fake pages, influencer networks, and coordinated smear campaigns. So journalists are often accused of, being paid by one side or another, and the language of traitor, spy, or collaborator spreads rapidly online. Of course, the same goes for humanitarian workers and activists. In fact, we've seen a number of emergency response room members arrested for their anti-war narratives and a wave of arrests under the 1991 Criminal Code. So, online accusations, often baseless or driven by desperation, have contributed to arbitrary detentions. And in many cases, detainees have no access to legal counsel. So, what we're seeing is that a lot of the information is being, weaponized to settle scores. We've seen pages called Reporter Collaborator. We've seen them crop up on social media, especially in the wake of Al Jazeera being retaken by the Sudanese Armed Forces and especially the Sudanese Shield Forces. We've seen, people being alleged to have helped an RSF officer with, providing fuel, for example, and of course that's led to them being detained. But yeah, so we've seen how online targeting can precede offline violence, and digital dehumanization removes social protection before physical harm occurs. And we've seen this with, as Meredith mentioned before, with the killing of the West Darfur Wali or governor Khamis al-Bakr. And we've seen this again, of course, with the RSF offensives in El Fashir. with social media essentially setting the stage and justifying the acts that are about to come. So yeah. I just want to draw your attention just to this picture on the left here. So this is an AI video that I saw on my timeline very recently, just as I was scrolling. And so it's a picture of a mother holding two children, and then the background, of course, is sort of bombed homes. And conveniently, she's wearing rags. And in the video, you'll find that she's actually talking in. She's not talking in a Sudanese Arabic dialect at all. As you can see, it's been liked 1 million times, 42,000 comments, 117,000 reposts, and almost 200,000 shares. Of course, in partner with Digihub, this is the campaign for the hold before you send it, and I really want people to understand that the same algorithms that amplify hate speech also amplify misinformation. So false reports spread faster than verified ones, and emotional content sadly spreads faster than facts. So we've seen recycled war footage, mainly from Yemen and Somalia. We've seen manipulated clips. We've seen AI-generated suffering videos, like I've just pointed to. And of course, Sudan has real suffering, and there's no reason for, to fabricate this. All it does is, deepen distrust. So, of course, trust has shifted away from institutions and towards emotionally charged influencers, and sometimes even towards armed actors themselves. So, I mean, as a Sudanese person and not just a journalist, so I want to highlight this sort of binary narrative that we're seeing currently between the SAF and the RSF being the only narratives available. And of course, what does this do? It means that civilian initiatives aren't being shown at all. And I think we can all, agree that the RSF, of course, committing heinous crimes in Sudan, but then by way of this, uh, all it does is sort of kind of polish over the SAF crimes as well. And the SAF are sort of painted as a force of good, and their crimes are, whitewashed. And what does this do? It leads to support for the former regime, and further deteriorates civilian voices. So, I mean, as journalists, we've seen time and time again that, highlighting SAF crimes leads to, allegations and sort of accusations that, of course, oh, you're an RSF sympathizer. And what's important also to understand is that the narratives, such as, for example, let's say on the border crossing with Chad and Adre being the sort of main humanitarian corridor. So the SAF have, previously blocked that path, saying that it was used as a crossing for the RSF to bring their weapons in. Of course, this narrative, what it's done is justify the delay in the delivery of humanitarian aid. So yeah, so the idea of not believing anything has become so entrenched in society, and this is a real problem because the erosion of trust is extremely dangerous to both journalism and society. And when disbelief becomes the norm, truth struggles to survive. So yeah, so a little bit about Radio Dabanga. So we're an independent Sudanese broadcaster and publisher. We were founded in 2008, originally to report the crisis in Darfur. Yeah, and today, even in exile, we reach every corner of Sudan through shortwave radio, satellite TV, and online platforms. So, in a country where journalists have been silenced, offices have been destroyed, and the internet is unreliable, completely cut off, Debunk is the only truly sort of independent source of news for millions. And this is, of course, including rural communities, displaced families, and refugees. So, our programming provides life-saving information of where to find food, healthcare and safety. And this is what makes radio, shortwave radio so powerful is the resilience of the technology itself, because it's almost impossible to block or intercept. And if one frequency is jammed, you can simply switch to another and the message still gets through. And of course, shortwave doesn't depend on cell networks or electricity. A simple battery-powered radio, which only costs a few dollars, can reach an entire village. And often, with what we've seen as well, is often one radio is shared as a sort of communal lifeline between neighbors and families and friends. And displaced communities sort of gather and listen together. Of course, the most important thing is that we broadcast in Sudanese Arabic so that people, whether in Darfur, in Khartoum, or a refugee camp in Chad, can hear, the news in their own voice. It's the next one. So yeah, of course. So journalists in Sudan are, of course, being silenced, but the story is still being told, and this is happening through exile networks. So yeah, so Radio Zubanga launched the Sudan Media Forum, which unites over 25 independent media institutions. And this coalition allows us to coordinate reporting, run joint newsrooms, and counter misinformation while amplifying Sudanese voices globally. However, broader challenges still remain, is that journalists must verify without access, report without protection, resist censorship without becoming propaganda tools. And what I mean by that is, of course, you know, uh, for national media to comply with Sudanese legislation. And of course, they must maintain trust in an environment where distrust is so deeply entrenched. And yeah, so breaking the silence isn't just a professional duty, it's a shared human responsibility. Thank you very much. That's it.